Captain Jake Miller felt the cold metal floor beneath his torn boots as the bug-like aliens pushed him through the dark hallways of their prison ship. His hands were tied behind his back, and dried blood covered his face from when they first captured him. The mission to scout the enemy's movements near Titan 7 had started like any other routine flight. Now here he was, a prisoner on an alien ship heading to who knows where. The Vexti guards were huge creatures that looked like giant praying mantises walking on two legs. Their green, shiny skin reflected the dim lights in the corridor, and their forearms moved in ways that made Jake's stomach turn. They spoke in clicks and hisses, sometimes switching to broken human language just to mock him. Jake's scout ship had been fast and quiet. It's perfect for gathering information about enemy movements, but someone had betrayed them. The plasma cannons came out of nowhere, turning his small vessel into twisted metal and fire. He barely made it to the escape pod before the whole thing exploded. Even then, the Vexti had been waiting for him, human meat for the beast. One of the guards clicked excitedly as they walked. Jake could smell something terrible coming from up ahead, a mix of old blood, fear, and something else he couldn't identify. His training had prepared him for capture and torture, but nothing had prepared him for this. The corridor seemed to go on forever, with strange alien writing covering the walls. Some of the symbols glowed with a sickly yellow light, while others seemed to move and shift when he wasn't looking directly at them. Doors lined both sides of the hallway, and from behind some of them came sounds that made his skin crawl, scratching, moaning, and occasionally something that sounded almost like crying. They stopped in front of a massive door that was different from all the others. This one was reinforced with thick metal bands, and the alien symbols carved into it were bigger and more complex. Even without being able to read their language, Jake could tell this door was meant to keep something very dangerous inside. "Feeding time," chittered one of the guards, its mandibles clicking together in what Jake was starting to recognize as their version of laughter. The sound made him think of bones breaking. The energy barrier in front of the door flickered and hummed with power. Jake could feel the electricity in the air making his hair stand up. When the barrier disappeared for just a moment, the guards grabbed him roughly and threw him forward into the darkness beyond. Jake hit the floor hard, rolling several times before coming to a stop. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and for a moment he just lay there, trying to catch his breath. The door sealed behind him with a sound like thunder. The energy barrier came back online with a buzz that seemed to vibrate in his bones. As his eyes got used to the dim light, Jake realized he was in a huge chamber, bigger than a football field and at least 3 stories high. The walls were covered in scratches and scorch marks, and the floor was littered with bones and torn pieces of corn, pieces of what might once have been clothing or armor from different alien species. Then he saw it. His heart nearly stopped. In the center of the cell, coiled like a massive snake, was a real dragon. Not some alien creature that looked like the dragons from Earth stories, but an actual dragon with midnight black scales that seemed to absorb light. Powerful wings folded against its back and burning amber eyes that looked older than civilization itself. The creature was at least 30 feet long, with claws that could probably cut through steel and teeth like polished daggers. Outside the cell, Jake could hear the Vexti guards pressing against the energy barrier, their insect faces twisted. With cruel excitement, let's see how long this soft human lasts against Grimfang. One of them hissed in broken English. The beast has killed warriors from 17 different worlds. Some lasted minutes, some lasted seconds. None lasted long enough to matter. The dragon Grimfang slowly lifted its massive head and looked directly at Jake. Those amber eyes seemed to see right through him, judging him, measuring him, deciding how quickly he would die. Jake could feel the power radiating from the creature, could smell the scent of old fire and ancient magic. But instead of panicking or trying to find a weapon or a place to hide, Jake did something that surprised everyone watching, including himself. He slowly stood up, brushed the dust off his torn uniform, and sat down cross-legged against the far wall. Then, as calmly as if he were back in his old classroom, He began drawing mathematical equations in the dust with his finger. The guards fell silent. The dragon's head tilted slightly, curiosity replacing the predatory hunger in those ancient eyes. And in that moment of unexpected quiet, something began that would change the fate of the entire galaxy. The silence in the massive cell stretched on for what felt like forever. Jake kept drawing his equations in the dust, working through complex problems that helped keep his mind calm. He could feel the dragon's eyes watching his every move, but he didn't look up. Years of studying alien species had taught him that showing fear was often the worst thing you could do. When meeting a new creature for the first time, the math problems weren't random. They were actually calculations for faster than light. Travel, something Jake had worked on back when he was still teaching at the university. Before the war changed everything. Before he traded his classroom for a cockpit and his research papers for reconnaissance missions. Finally, after what seemed like hours, the dragon spoke. His voice was deep and powerful, like distant thunder rolling across mountains, it seemed. To come from everywhere at once, vibrating through the metal floor and up into Jake's bones. You are different from the others they throw to me, small human. Jake didn't jump or gasp like the dragon probably expected. He just kept working on his equations, his finger tracing numbers and symbols in the dusty floor. Dr. Jake Miller. He replied in a steady voice, still not looking up from his work. And you're not just some mindless beast, are you? The massive head tilted to one side, and Jake could hear the scales scraping against each other with a sound like metal on stone. There was something almost curious in the dragon's posture now, instead of the pure hunger that had been there before. I am Grimfang of the Starfire clan, the dragon said, and Jake could hear pride mixed with sadness in those words. The metal bugs captured me 3 cycles ago when I defended our hatchling caves. His voice grew heavy with an ancient kind of pain that made Jake's chest tighten. They forced me to kill the prisoners they bring. They threatened to destroy the younglings. They still hold captive. Now Jake did look up, and when he did, his scientist training kicked in immediately. He could see that this wasn't just a conversation, this was a creature in pain. Along the dragon's sides, hidden partially by the dim lighting, were several deep gashes that looked infected. The edges were swollen and discolored, and Jake could smell the sickness coming from them. Those wounds need treatment, Jake said, standing up slowly and carefully. He made sure to move in a way that wouldn't seem threatening, not just a soldier, you know. Before all this war business started, I was a xenobiologist, someone who studies alien life forms. I spent years learning about different species and how their bodies work. Let me help you with those injuries. Grimfang's amber eyes narrowed, and for a moment Jake thought he might have made a mistake. But then the dragon's expression softened. Slightly, you would help me? Even knowing what I am forced to do to survive? Jake was already tearing strips from his uniform jacket, the tough fabric, making small ripping sounds in the quiet cell. Everyone does what they have to do to survive, he said simply. That doesn't make you evil. As Jake approached, Grimfang remained perfectly still. Though Jake could see the tension and the powerful muscles beneath those black scales. Up close, the dragon was even more impressive, and the wounds were worse than Jake had first thought. Someone had been deliberately keeping them from healing properly. This is going to hurt, Jake warned as he began cleaning the first wound with water from his emergency ration pack. But if we don't get the infection out, it could kill you eventually. Grimfang barely flinched as Jake worked, though Jake could see the pain in those ancient eyes. Why? The dragon asked quietly. Why help an enemy? Jake paused in his work and looked up. Are you my enemy? Or are you just another prisoner in this place? As Jake continued treating the wounds, Grimfang began to talk. He told stories of his homeworld, a place of crystal mountains and silver rivers, where dragons lived in great cliffside cities carved from living rock. He spoke of the younglings in the nursery caves, barely old enough to fly, when the Vexti invasion ships appeared in their skies. In return, Jake shared memories of Earth. He described forests where the trees grew so tall you couldn't see their tops, cities filled with millions of humans all working together, and universities where people from all over the planet came to learn and share knowledge. He talked about his old life, teaching students about the wonders of alien biology. Back when meeting other species seemed like an exciting possibility instead of a deadly reality. My clan fought for 3 days straight, Grimfang said, his voice growing quiet with memory. We knew we couldn't win, but we had to protect the younglings. I was the last one flying when they finally brought me down with their shock nets. Jake finished bandaging the last wound with strips from his shirt. How many younglings did you save? 47, Grimfang replied immediately. 47 made it to the deep caves before the metal bugs broke through our defenses. Then you didn't lose, Jake said firmly. 47 lives saved is a victory. In any war, the dragon looked at him with something that might have been surprise. The guards told me that tomorrow they plan to make us fight each other for their entertainment. They said they want to see how long a human can last against a dragon's fire. Jake met those burning amber eyes without flinching. Well then, we'd better make sure that doesn't happen. What do you mean? Jake smiled, and for the first time since his capture, it was a real smile. I mean, that's what humans do, Grimfang. We survive. We don't survive alone. Over the following days, Jake's mind switched into full scientist mode. Every moment the guards weren't watching, he was studying something new about their prison. He counted how many steps the guards took during their rounds, timing them with his heartbeat since his watch had been destroyed in the crash. He noticed that the night shift guards were lazier than the day shift, often stopping to chat with each other instead of doing proper patrols. The energy barrier that kept them locked in was particularly interesting.
Hours.
Listening to its hum, watching how the light patterns changed, and even testing how it reacted when he got close. He discovered that the barrier had a slight flicker every 47 minutes, probably some kind of automatic system reset that lasted maybe 2 seconds. You're always staring at the walls, Grimfang observed one evening as Jake examined scratches near the ventilation grate. What do you see that I don't? Jake ran his fingers along a series of marks in the metal. These aren't random scratches. Look at the pattern. They're too regular, too precise. Something with claws made these, but not in anger. Someone was trying to dig through here. The dragon moved closer, his massive form creating shadows that danced in the dim light. Warrior from 2 cycles ago. He spent weeks clawing at that spot before they took him to the arena. Did he find anything behind it? I don't know. The guards took him before he could finish. Jake pressed his ear against the wall and tapped gently with his knuckles. The sound was different here, hollow instead of solid. There's definitely space back there. Probably a maintenance shaft or ventilation system. During the day, when the guards were more active, Jake and Grimfang would talk quietly about the ship's layout. The dragon had an incredible memory for details, remembering every corridor he'd been dragged through, every room he'd seen during his 3 years of captivity. The arena is on level 7, Grimfang explained, using his claw to draw a rough map in the dust. The guard quarters are here on level 5. The bridge is somewhere up top, but I've never been there. What about weapons storage, food supplies, engineering sections? Grimfang's amber eyes lit up with understanding. You really are planning an escape. I'm planning our escape, Jake corrected. There's a difference. As the days passed, Jake's sketches in the dust became more complex. He drew detailed diagrams of the energy barrier system, mapped out guard patrol routes, and even started working on calculations for the ship's power distribution. His years of studying alien technology were finally paying off in ways he never expected. There's a service tunnel behind the north wall, Grimfang mentioned during one of their planning sessions. I remember the guards talking about maintenance crews using it. Too small for me, but you could probably fit through it. No. We go together, or we don't go at all, but human. If you could escape through that tunnel, and then what? Jake interrupted. I steal a ship and fly away while you're stuck here. That's not happening, my friend. Grimfang stared at him for a long moment. You called me friend. That's what you are. Jake showed Grimfang his latest sketches of the barrier system. Besides, I think I've figured out something the Vexed Eye don't realize about their own security system. The drawings showed the energy barrier from different angles, with notes written in the margins about frequency patterns and power fluctuations. These bugs think they're so advanced, but they don't understand human engineering principles. Their security has one major flaw. It's designed to keep prisoners in, not to stop a coordinated escape from within. Grimfang studied the diagrams carefully. "You speak of escape as if it's actually possible," he said, though Jake could see hope starting to flicker in those ancient amber eyes. Jake set down his makeshift pencil, a piece of metal he'd found in the corner, and looked directly at his cellmate. "I haven't been completely honest with you about who I am." The dragon's head tilted slightly, waiting. "I wasn't just any xenobiologist teaching at some small university. I was the lead researcher on something called Project Breakthrough Humanities. First successful faster-than-light communication system. We figured out how to send messages across the galaxy instantly, something most alien species thought was impossible." Grimfang's eyes widened slightly. "That's why they want you alive." "Exactly. They need what's in my head. But here's the thing they don't know: understanding. FTL communication means understanding some very advanced physics and engineering concepts. Now, I know things about energy manipulation and system design that they've probably never encountered." Jake pointed to a specific part of his barrier diagram. "See this frequency modulation here? It's based on principles that humans discovered but most other species haven't figured out yet. The Vextai are using it without really understanding how it works, and you can exploit that." "I think so, but I'll need your help." Your fire breath isn't just for show, is it? You can control the temperature and intensity. Grimfang's lips pulled back in what was definitely a smile this time, showing rows of teeth that looked like polished swords. "Human, I can melt through 3 inches of titanium steel when I need to." "Perfect." Jake grinned back. "Then let's teach these bugs why they should fear humans." And dragons working together. The dragon's rumbling laugh shook dust from the ceiling. For the first time in 3 years, Grimfang allowed himself to believe that freedom might actually be possible. Outside their cell, the Vextai guards continued their routine patrols, completely unaware that their 2 most dangerous prisoners had just become something far more terrifying than they could imagine. They had become allies. The day of their escape came sooner than expected. Jake woke up to the sound of excited chittering from the guards outside their cell. Today was what the Vextai called exhibition feeding, a sick form of entertainment where they forced all the prisoners to watch as they executed someone in the arena. It was psychological torture designed to break the spirits of anyone who might be thinking about resistance. But Jake had been counting on this event. For the past week, he'd been carefully collecting materials from their cell's waste recycling system, bits of organic matter, chemical residues, even his own saliva. Using his knowledge of Vexti biology from his university days, he'd been creating something special. The Vexti were insect-like creatures, which meant they communicated partly through chemical signals, pheromones that their antennae could detect. Jake had figured out how to create a compound that would completely scramble those signals, like jamming a radio frequency. "Are you ready for this?" Jake whispered too. Grimfang as the guards started opening other cell doors throughout the prison level. The dragon's amber eyes burned with determination. "I have been ready for 3 years." Jake had hidden his homemade chemical weapon inside what looked like a piece of torn fabric from his uniform. As the guards herded them toward the arena with the other prisoners, Jake kept the bundle close to his chest. The corridors filled with beings from dozens of different worlds, some he recognized from his xenobiology studies, others he'd never seen before. The arena was a massive circular chamber with seating rising up on all sides. The guards forced the prisoners to sit in the lower sections while the Vextai officers took the better seats higher up. Jake noticed that the air circulation vents were positioned perfectly for what he had in mind. In the center of the arena floor, a terrified creature that looked like a cross between a bear and an octopus was chained to a metal post. Jake forced himself not to look away as several Vextai warriors entered the arena floor, their weapons gleaming under the harsh lights. "This is barbaric," muttered someone behind Jake. He turned to see a human woman with short brown hair and the muscled build of a soldier. The prison uniform had name tape that read Reynolds. "It's about to get a lot worse for them," Jake whispered back. As the guards gathered around the arena to watch their sick entertainment, Jake made his move, quietly tore open his chemical bundle, and dropped it near an air intake vent. Compound immediately started evaporating, getting sucked into the ship's ventilation system. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The execution in the arena continued, and the Vexti guards chittered excitedly as they watched. But after about 5 minutes, Jake started noticing the first signs that his plan was working. One of the guards near the arena floor stumbled slightly, his forearms moving out of sync with each other. Another guard was turning his head back and forth rapidly, his compound eyes unable to focus properly. The chemical Jake had created was attacking their nervous systems, scrambling the signals. Their brains used to coordinate movement and process visual information. "Now," Jake shouted, jumping to his feet. Grimfong rose up to his full height and took the deepest breath Jake had ever seen him take. When he exhaled, a stream of fire so hot it turned the air around them white-hot shot toward the nearest group of guards. But this wasn't just random destruction. Jake had calculated exactly where Grimfang needed to aim. The dragon's fire hit the organic components of the ship's structure, living tissue that the Vexti used instead of metal in many of their designs. The superheated air created pressure differentials that Jake had worked out mathematically, turning the corridors into wind tunnels that sucked disoriented guards off their feet. "The exit is this way," Jake yelled over the chaos, leading a group of prisoners toward the corridor he and Grimfang had identified during their planning sessions. The human woman Reynolds was right behind them, and Jake could see she knew how to fight. She'd grabbed a weapon from a fallen guard and was using it with the skill of someone who'd seen real combat. "I'm Beth," she called out as they ran. "Beth Reynolds, Outer Colony Defense Force. Jake Miller, Ace." "This is Grimfang," Jake replied. Then pointed toward a man in engineering overalls who was helping other prisoners escape from their restraints. "And that's Tom. He's an engineer from the mining platforms." Tom looked up and grinned. "Someone's been doing their homework on ship layouts," he said, nodding approvingly at Jake's choice of escape route. "This corridor leads straight to the main systems hub." As they fought their way through the ship, their group kept growing. Beth's military training, Tom's engineering knowledge, and Grimfong's raw power combined with Jake's strategic thinking created a force that the confused and disoriented Vexti couldn't stop. The chemical weapon was still working. Guards were stumbling into walls, unable to aim their weapons properly, their usual coordination completely destroyed. The running battle through the ship's corridors felt like it lasted forever. Watch showed it had only been 23 minutes when they finally reached their target, the bridge. The massive doors were sealed, but Tom took one look at the locking mechanism and started working on the control panel. "I can get us in," he said, his fingers flying over alien interfaces. "But it's going to take a few minutes. We don't have..." "A few minutes," Beth said, pointing back down the corridor where Jake could see Vexti reinforcements coming, wearing breathing apparatus that protected them from his chemical attack. Grimfang, Jake said quietly, "Can you melt through the door?" The dragon smiled, showing those sword-like teeth. "Stand back." The blast of fire that followed was so intense it made Jake's skin feel like he was standing next to an open furnace. The bridge doors, which had probably never been designed to withstand that kind of heat, simply melted away like ice cream in summer. Jake rushed onto the bridge, his heart pounding with excitement. Years of studying alien technology had prepared him for this moment. His fingers flew over the control systems, downloading everything he could find: fleet positions, military codes, strategic plans, communication frequencies. The Vexti had made one critical error in capturing him. They had seriously underestimated what one determined human scientists could accomplish when he put his mind to it. The stolen Vexti ship was falling apart around them as they limped through space toward the nearest human outpost. Jake sat in the pilot's chair, trying to keep their wounded vessel flying, while Grimfang used his fire breath to weld shut hull breaches that kept opening up. The ship hadn't been designed for the kind of punishment they'd put it through during their escape. "How much further?" called out Beth from the communications station, where she was trying to contact any friendly forces within range. "About 6 hours if this bucket of bolts holds together," Jake replied, adjusting their course to avoid an asteroid field. Behind him, Tom was crawling through maintenance shafts, trying to keep the life support systems running with spare parts and sheer determination. The other prisoners they'd rescued were scattered throughout the ship, each one contributing what they could. There was Zara, a pilot from the mining colonies who knew how to navigate through dangerous space. Kevin, a medic who was treating the wounded using supplies they'd found in the ship's medical bay. Even the non-human prisoners were helping a blue-skinned engineer named Vex, who understood energy systems, and a warrior from a species Jake had never encountered before who kept watch for any pursuing ships. When Proxima Station finally appeared, on their screens, Jake felt relief wash over him like a cool wave. The massive human military base looked like the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen, with its rotating sections and defensive weapon platforms gleaming in the light of the nearby star. "Unknown vessel, this is Proxima Station Control," came a voice over the radio. "Identify yourself immediately, or we will open fire." Beth grabbed the microphone. "Proxima Control, this is Lieutenant Beth Reynolds, Outer Colony Defense Force. We're flying a captured enemy vessel with refugees aboard, requesting immediate assistance." There was a long pause before the reply came. "Beth Reynolds was reported killed in action 3 weeks ago. Explain yourself." Jake took the microphone from Beth. "Proxima Control, this is Dr. Jake Miller, formerly of Project Breakthrough. Have critical intelligence about Vexi operations and a ship full of people who need medical attention." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Dr. Miller, you're cleared for emergency docking at Base 7. Security teams will meet you there." 3 days later, Jake stood in the conference room of Proxima Station's command center, still hardly believing they'd made it out alive. Admiral Lisa Thompson, the station commander, was a tough-looking woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much war. She'd been studying the data crystal Jake had given her, terabytes of enemy intelligence that could change the course of the entire conflict. "This is incredible," Admiral Thompson said, looking up from her tablet. "Fleet positions, communication codes, supply routes. You've handed us the biggest intelligence breakthrough of the war." Jake glanced over at Grimfang, who was coiled in the corner of the room. The dragon had barely fit through the stations corridors, and having him in the command center had caused quite a stir among the human officers. "You didn't do it alone, Admiral. None of this would have been possible without cooperation between different species." "That's what I want to talk to you about," Jake continued, moving to the large display screen that showed current battle positions across the galaxy. "I'd like to propose a completely new kind of warfare." Within hours, Jake found himself surrounded by the fleet's top military leaders, explaining concepts that most of them had never considered before. Grimfang served as both translator and tactical advisor, his centuries of experience adding depth to Jake's scientific analysis. "The Vexti Empire has one critical weakness," Jake explained, pointing to star charts that showed enemy fleet movements. "They can't conceive of real cooperation between different species. To them, the universe is divided into conquerors and conquered. There's no middle ground." General Martinez, the fleet's chief strategist, leaned forward. "What are you suggesting?" "Build alliances. Real ones. Not just temporary treaties, but actual partnerships, where different species work together as equals." Jake gestured toward the group of freed prisoners who had volunteered to stay and help with intelligence analysis. "Look what we accomplished with just one ship. Imagine what we could do with entire fleets working in coordination." The freed prisoners had indeed become something unprecedented, the first true multi-species resistance cell. Beth had been promoted to colonel and was training mixed-species combat teams. Tom was working with alien engineers to develop new technologies that combined the best ideas from multiple worlds. Even some of the non-human prisoners were teaching human soldiers their combat techniques. But the real breakthrough came 6 months later, when Jake stood on the bridge of the DSV Unity, the first ship in human history designed from the ground up to be crewed by multiple species working as equals. The bridge had stations designed for different alien physiologies, translation systems that worked in real time, and command structures that took advantage of each species' natural strengths. Beside him, Grimfang served not as a weapon or a tool, but as a partner and friend. The dragon's tactical knowledge, combined with his ability to communicate with other dragon refugees they'd rescued, had created an intelligence network that spanned multiple star systems. Incoming transmission from the Kepler Defense Force, announced Lieutenant Hayes from the communications station, reporting success in the Titan sector. Meant 3 Vexti supply convoys intercepted, minimal casualties on our side. Jake smiled as he looked at the tactical display. Green symbols representing Allied forces were spread across dozens of star systems, humans working with dragons. Former prisoners now leading their own resistance cells, entire planets that had switched sides after learning about the multi-species alliance. Any word from the Outer Rim? Jake asked. Yes, sir, Hayes replied. Captain Reynolds reports that the liberation of Mining Station Omega was successful. They're requesting additional medical supplies for the rescued workers. The war was still far from over. The Vexti Empire was vast and powerful, with resources that seemed endless. But for the first time since the conflict began, they were facing something they had never encountered before and didn't understand. It's a galaxy that had learned to work together instead of fighting alone. Jake walked over to the main viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other prison ships were carrying captured beings from dozens of worlds. But now those ships were being hunted by mixed crews who understood that their strength came not from dominating others, but from building bridges across the vast darkness between worlds. The Vexti had made their biggest mistake when they threw one human scientist into a cell with a dragon and expected them to destroy each other. Instead, they had created something the galaxy had never seen before, proof that different species could not only coexist, but thrive together. And that was a lesson that was spreading across the stars, one liberated world at a time.